talk today about a phenomenon I refer to as the cult of positivity, or the positivity police. Now, this phenomenon is a similar and adjacent phenomenon to much of what we see in the realm of SJWs, but it's not identical and it's not exactly the same thing. Most prominently, I believe the cult of positivity, as I term it, is something that exists independent of SJWs, which is to say, everyday normal people subscribe to it, believe it, and indeed try to practice it. And I'm going to try to make the argument why this is harmful. Well, first off, what is the cult of positivity? The cult of positivity is a phenomenon I've observed for years now that demands that people respond and act and produce behavior that is not only disproportionately, quote unquote, positive, but inappropriately so. Which is to say, behavior that is deemed positive that isn't warranted at all. Now, there are many arenas where you can observe this. I mean, YouTube is a gigantic arena and probably the first place to observe it. You'll see, for example, in some of my videos where I talk about countries, that people will be critical of them for various reasons, but in this specific case, because there was some negativity, what they perceive as negativity in it. If you go a while back, and I was talking to the Spaniard about Spain, and he gave his opinions and views, and maybe some of them are correct, and maybe some of them are not, but the overwhelming criticism was that it was, quote-unquote, negative. Now, it's interesting that in many of these cases of the positivity police coming in and conducting raids, the issue is not the veracity of the claims being made, whether it's in a video of mine or elsewhere, but the fact that it's negative. So the criticism, in fact, is, wait a second, you can't say that, it's negative. But that's not an actual criticism of the facts or the details of the information or the opinions of the viewer. Is it merely stating that something is quote-unquote negative doesn't really get you very much in the way of making a good argument. Now, it's not just there, though. Another phenomenon you see it in is in online gaming, competitive gaming, where particularly sensitive people don't like being criticized for mistakes they're making. Now, this isn't universal. I certainly don't subscribe to this, and if I make a mistake, I'm more than willing to concede it. And I've noticed on occasion other people as well. I'll give you just an example from Overwatch. People committing the mistake of overextending and thus endangering themselves and being separated from their teams because they don't have the protection of allies who are close by. Well, some people admit to it, but many people will tell you to fuck off. Other people will be completely incompetent at the heroes that they're playing, and you point this out and suggest that they perhaps should switch, and well, they can't do it because you're being negative. Now, this also applies to real life, though. And I understand where this comes from. People want to feel good about themselves and their accomplishments, and people want to not feel depressed, as it were. But the importance of an accurate depiction of how things are, what things are, and even in the case of competitive gaming, of how players play, is an important one, because it gives you the ability to accurately assess reality as it is. If we find ourselves too steeped in this so-called positivity model, which is, of course, everywhere on YouTube. I mean, you look at people like Matthew Santoro and all the rest of them, the fake smiles, and I've addressed related issues in The Price of the Lie and some other places. It blinds us to an intellectually honest appraisal of ourselves as individuals. I mean, when I was growing up, primarily in the 80s, I played a number of sports. I played football, or soccer for Americans. I was okay, very unexceptional. Nobody told me I was exceptional, and that pretty much corresponded with my performance. The few occasions where I actually did exceptionally well, every now and then, yeah, people said, nice play, good move. I was absolutely horrific at basketball, being, short, stocky, and unathletic in general, and I received due non-praise for that. These are just examples, but I think we're in an era now where the necessity of being quote-unquote positive for the sake of people's feelings is clouding our ability to assess situations accurately. Now, of course, this also applies to SJWs, but the point I'm making is that many of the people who suffer from the malaise of almost unconsciously belonging to the positivity police, they don't even understand what happened. I mean, too much mollycoddling, too much, frankly speaking, lack of forthright speech, and it almost certainly begins at the parental level, but it's just infused in society at large. You don't need to be great at everything to be okay overall as a human being, and you certainly don't need to believe these things. And what I just can't understand is how this is supposed to help us long term. I mean, we're dealing effectively now in many ways with adult children, and many of them, of course, are women. I think the first people who tend to respond, quote unquote, negatively to negativity are women. I mean, the very nature of MGTOW investigations from its outset, essentially, has, unfortunately for those people, cast a rather poor light on certain members of the human race. Now, I don't view this as negative or positive one way or another. Women being women is just women being women, but people perceive it as such. You always have to paint the walls in a nice white, azure blue pastoral, I suppose, and people don't react well to it when you don't do that. But the price we pay is lack of understanding, and individuals not even understanding themselves and their own abilities, not even caring about striving to be good. I'll give you an example. Look, I have to drop from gaming because that's the most immediate one to me. I play the game Overwatch on a fairly regular basis. I know, given my own abilities, and particularly my age, middle-aged person, that I'm not going to be able to compete with much younger people, specifically younger males, in a reflex-driven system where many offensive characters excel based on your twitch reflexes and what have you. And so I invest heavily in support and tanks because they're equally important, but characters that can be played largely on the basis of knowledge and practice and experience. I wouldn't get offended or feel that someone's being negative if someone told me I play, say, a tracer like shit, because my tracer probably isn't all that good. This is the problem, and I know this is very unique to that particular game, but imagine if I had grown up being told what a wonderful athlete I am. I mean, the complete polar opposite of what actually is true. What would I have thought? I would have continued to play sport, and I would have sucked at it. Imagine I had grown up claiming that my very average to below average ability in mathematics was somehow a positive thing, and I could do just as well as being an engineer as anything else. I mean, this is the price we pay, the obfuscation of the truth, and the fact that people aren't even disputing some of the claims oftentimes. It's just, as I said, it's negative, therefore it's wrong. Personally, I think these people are a plague on humanity. They are just as bad as SJWs, although there is some overlap. Many SJWs fall into this camp. But most of them are just regular, normal people who have become indoctrinated by the miasma of modernity and modern thought. Everything needs to be positive. Everything needs to be good. And sometimes they even demand disproportionate reactions to events that warrant absolutely no positivity. I've actually seen this in real life. I had a friend a while back whose father recently died, and I'm not one to obsess emotionally over things, but certainly understand one's situation. And in his situation, he's not going to be in the best mood. And then I was walking along with him. It's actually a few years back, to be honest. And encountered some people, and they were telling him how he should cheer up and look on the bright side of things. And I just thought, wait a second, that's not proportionate to the situation. So I get it. People want to feel good, but it's just too dangerous. Now, where does all this ultimately come from? Well, I can only offer hypotheses, and I think one of the hypotheses I can offer is a pretty substantial one. We've seen a transformation of society at large and in general due to modern technology and levels of safety that have been unprecedented. Hitherto unseen and unknown, which is to say, in a world where there is no imminent danger, where there isn't that much risk of starving to death, of even losing your income completely due to a robust welfare system, people feel safe. And the ability to realistically assess the surrounding world you live in becomes diluted and just deteriorates. Recall that the ancients had a much more realistic appraisal of the nature of the male-female relationship than people in modernity do, even a few centuries ago, even 2 centuries ago. It's the same principle. When people are surrounded by safety, when virtually nothing bad can happen to them, they take on a mentality that requires the obfuscation of things that are actually bad, or things that are perhaps not too charitable to certain individuals, but need to be said or stated nonetheless. And so this is in my view, my hypothesis, a derivative of this super safe society that we're living in. Now, I'm not suggesting that we return back to the days of hardship and scarcity, although some have. That I don't think that's a good idea. It would greatly lower my own standard of life as well as yours if you like modern life as opposed to, foraging and hunting and what have you. But it is important to point out, and one can become aware of these things, that something that isn't beamingly positive isn't necessarily negative, and something that is negative isn't necessarily inaccurate or wrong. This is something that we really need to bear in mind. It's becoming increasingly difficult in this modern society that likes to deny everything that might cast individuals or groups into a poor light and bring about a bit of self-reflection. I mean, back in the day, you needed to know what your abilities were and what you were good at and what you weren't good at. And the reason for this was simple. You had to survive. You had to prosper. There was no modern welfare state to catch you if you fell. There was, well, if you go further back, there was barely any society whatsoever. And so there is a price to pay for modern society, and that is this miasma, as I put it, of modern thought that just obfuscates and shifts the truth and tries to just cover everything up in this saccharine, disgustingly sweet sense of quote-unquote positivity. And believe it or not, your everyday person has been affected by this. It's not just SJWs. The positivity police, they're just about everyone. You got to be positive, that sort of thing. Not only does it drive me crazy, I think it's deleterious and harmful in the long run. So I wanted to make this video to point this out. It's something that I think is an adjacent phenomenon, heavily related to and similar to some of the other phenomena discussed by me and others, but it has a certain twist, this notion you got to be positive. Anything that is not quote-unquote positive is bad. The truth or veracity of statements being made to the contrary notwithstanding, these people just don't care about this sort of thing. And we definitely need to form a pushback. Positive isn't necessarily good in the sense of understanding and progress, and we do want to make progress as a species, and this isn't helping. Everyone, thanks for tuning in, and enjoy the remainder of your Sunday, wherever you might be. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.